Hello, everyone. I'm Bo from Brutal Commentary, and today I'm going to break it down our next matchup for UFC Houston. In this one, we have Jacobe Smith taking on Josiah Harrell. Now, this is going to be short notice for Harrell. It was originally supposed to be Jacobe Smith versus Suk Young Kyo, and I gotta say, I was looking forward to that so much. Two guys, prospects in the welterweight division, both 2-0 in the UFC, and looking like forces really quite unstoppable with Jacobe Smith with his power, athleticism, and wrestling, while Kyo with his control, grappling, and chain wrestling. They just both were looking pretty good. And who was the better prospect? We were going to find out. Unfortunately, Kyo got injured, and now replacing him on a few days' notice or I guess I should say about a week, we have Josiah Harrell. Now, for those of you who don't know, he is 11-0 as a professional, same as Jacoby Smith. Fought mostly in the LFA and Combat League. What's interesting though is Harrell was actually supposed to fight in the UFC before. Back at UFC 290, Harrell was going to fight Jack Della Maddalena on short notice, replacing and then injured Sean Brady. Unfortunately, Harrell suffered like a brain bleed, I believe, or something involving his head. I can't remember. It was just like concussion symptoms or something worse. But it looked like he may have never be able to fight, and unfortunately lost his opportunity. But since that scare, which is years ago now, we are talking about like June of 2023. Since then, he's been able to rack up a good few wins, or more specifically, get good finishes in Combat League, like against Quinn Parks Jr. or Kengan Jarich, for example. Harrell has done a great job and a very good comeback story. Now he takes on Jacobe Smith, who he himself, like I said, is 2-0 in the UFC. Got a nice knockout win over Preston Parson last January. And then his most recent fight at UFC 317 submitted Nico Price. So this is definitely going to be fun. It's going to be violent for sure. Both guys are finishers. And overall, while I think the Kill fight would have been a better fight, this is by no means a bad fight whatsoever. Now, with that out of the way, let's get down to the breakdown. Starting with Jacobe Smith. Smith is explosive. That's the first thing you notice. He's strong, fast, and carries real finishing intent in everything he throws. Like, for example, the Preston Parsons fight, easy example. When Jacobe, he landed that right hand, he literally punched through Preston Parsons' chin. His power, explosiveness are legit. On the feet, Jacobe is reckless, can be very aggressive, sometimes reckless, as shown against like Nico Price, but very aggressive. He works behind good straight shots, throws with power and combination, and doesn't hesitate once he sees an opening. Technically speaking, Smith's striking is built around pressure and physicality. He closes distance quickly, throws hard down the middle, and forces reactions. He's not a flashy, spinning attack type striker. He's direct, straight punches, heavy kicks, clear intent. So the pros here are obvious. When Jacobe commits, he hurts people. His power translates, and he doesn't need volume to make an impact. The cons, well, we saw in the Nico Price fight, he kind of faded a little bit after the first round. Now, granted, he did find the sub over Nico Price, but it's still a little concerning that he got tagged with a lot of good shots by Price, and like I said, shows to be a little winded. But that could just be he's very explosive and hadn't had a fight outside of that to leave the first round. You know what I mean? Because oftentimes, Jacobe will rely on his explosiveness more than layering his offense. And if someone survives the early storm and forces extended exchanges, those moments where his output can start to dip. And like I said, show fatigue. So I think that's the biggest thing. Now, looking at his wrestling, and because Jacobe's a really good wrestler, he is a very good top control. When he's on top, Jacobe's heavy and physical. He doesn't just hold the position. He looks to damage and advance. His jiu-jitsu isn't overly flashy, but it's effective, and he's comfortable finishing from dominant position. Plus, some of his takedowns are absolutely nasty. I rewatched his Contender Series fight against Christian Siov, and you'll notice he gets a sort of body lock, trips out the leg of Sior, and is able to make Sior kind of fall onto his knee and mess it up in some way because Sior couldn't really put any pressure on it to get up. So yeah, his takedowns are nasty too. Who everything Jacobe Smith does, it has the intent to inflict damage. Now looking at Josiah Harrell. Harrell is gritty, tough, durable. He's the type of fighter who doesn't break easily. I mean, like I said, he came back from a very significant brain injury. On the feet, he's serviceable, but not overwhelming. He can strike, but his game is more about persistence than power. Technically, Harrell is more comfortable when the fight becomes messy. Scrambles, transitional grappling, grinding exchanges. That's where he shines. His jiu-jitsu is legit. He's opportunistic. And if you give him your back in a scramble or overcommit in a takedown, Harrell can capitalize. He's not necessarily a dominant positional grafter, but he is crafty. The pro for Harrell is resilience and the submission awareness he has. Plus, he's just dangerous in chaos. The cons, now, while he is undefeated, same as Smith, there have been moments where he's shown vulnerability. That being, Harrell often needs chaos to thrive. In structured, high-level exchanges, he can be outgunned. And against someone like physical like Jacobe, that could show. Now, talking about just stylistic clash. Smith is the more explosive and physically imposing athlete. There's no doubt about that. Harrell is, I think, the more scramble-oriented grappler, while Jacobe is more the wrestler type. In this matchup, if this fight stays clean and structured, Smith's advantages are obvious. He's faster, he hits harder, and he can dictate where the exchanges take place. The biggest question is what happens if this hits the mat. If Harrell initiates grappling and creates scrambles, that's his best path. He needs transitions, he needs movement, he needs to be unpredictable. But here's the problem for me. Smith is physically strong enough to where I think he can shut down a lot of the scrambles. If Smith gets on top first, Harrell's submission game becomes much harder to access because Smith's base is strong, his control is heavy. If he stays patient instead of chasing submissions recklessly, Harrell's window shrinks drastically. On the feet, I think it also favors Smith heavily. As well, Harrell's striking doesn't carry the same, because Harrell's striking game doesn't carry the same stopping threat. He can hang in exchanges, but Smith's speed and power are a different level. And if Smith commits to straight shots and doesn't swing wide into counters, he can land first and land harder. Plus, another key factor is pace. Smith can dictate the tempo. If he chooses to wrestle, he can. If he chooses to strike, he likely has the advantage there too. Harrell, by contrast, is more reactive. He thrives when opponents give him something chaotic to work with. So, if Smith stays disciplined, no reckless spinning attacks, no diving to submissions without control, the fight becomes very straightforward. As I think early rounds favor Smith because of the power and explosiveness, and if this goes into the middle stages, I think it, again, favors Smith because of the physical control he has. Late rounds, however, that's where I think Harrell's toughness can show up, but only if he's still competitive on the scorecards. Stylistically, I think Harrell's path is narrow. Create chaos, find a submission, capitalize on overcommitting. Smith's path is a bit wider in terms of victory. Win the striking exchanges, control the wrestling, stay heavy on top, and avoid careless mistakes. And in MMA, the wider path usually wins. So when it comes time to make the call, I'm going to side with the more athletic, more powerful, and more positionally dominant fighter. My official pick, I'm going to go with Jacobe Smith, and I'm going to pick him via TKO. I think using his physical strength, structured pressure, and controlled grappling to neutralize Harrell's submission threat are most likely his keys to victory. Plus, the longer stays on the feet, the more Jacobe has a chance to line up that 1-2 he has, and I think he can punch straight through Joshua Harrell's chin. It's kind of a shame, like I said, I think Harrell's actually really good, and I think he was going to probably fight on the Contender Series sooner rather than later, but I give credit. He took the call on short notice against a prospect like Jacobe Smith, and I think he'll put up a valiant effort. I don't think he is a lamb to slaughter, but I still got to go with the guy who has been in camp more, has the physical tools, and overall, I think some of the better grappling and better striking in comparison to his opposition. So once again, I'm picking Jacobe Smith, and I'm going to pick him via TKO. But with that being said, that's been my breakdown to this matchup. If you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below on who you think's going to win. Until then, I've been Bo from Brutal Commentary. I thank you all for listening. And remember, stay calm, stay respectful, and enjoy the violence. I'll see y'all next time.